next.
Moving in their chairs. Hi.
Hi. Will you take me shopping?
Oh. You like my flowers?
Yeah.
It's my 80s look. I love
beautiful.
80s. I'm stuck in the 80s.
So I interviewed you
Yes.
a while
I know.
ago. In like 2011.
I know.
5 years ago.
It was so great that
It was.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you said to me that was so important, because I was like dealing with my grad school baggage, my like art school grad school baggage, and I was constantly like, I'm an artist, I'm an organizer, how do I do both? And you just were like, you just do it. There's this thing called cultural organizing. You're a cultural organizer, get over it, you know, move on. It was like such a non-issue for you.
Yes.
So thanks for that.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if there was like a moment, I was thinking like the first question I wanted to ask was like, how did you become Favianna Rodriguez? But like, was there a moment where like the art and the organizing coalesced? Like the earliest moment?
The earliest moment, oh gosh, that's a great question. I grew up in Oakland, and I also witnessed the effects of the crack cocaine epidemic because I was raised in the 80s. I think that one thing that was said earlier is that I actually don't think that there's a separation between what's political and what's life. And I think that because of we centralize the lives of white people, that anyone who's a woman or if you're a person of color, it's seen as political, but I actually think that it's just life. I mean, what we're experiencing is a universal experience. So I think that for me, one of the times when I noticed, maybe when I really understood the power of culture and how it affects our behavior and our perception of ourselves, when I grew up in a very Catholic family, and all the messages that I would get was like, close your legs, don't get pregnant, don't get an STD. And I remember going to quinceañeras. Quinceañeras is when young Latinas turn 15 and they're wearing these like super white dresses, and we would hear these sermons about virginity, and I would be like, oh my God, everyone here is like already sexually active. I don't know why we're all going through this really stupid ritual. And I really began to, and around that time, it was the 90s, you also had the killing of affirmative action here in California. You had the 3 strikes you're outlaw, you had Proposition 187, NAFTA had passed, the internet wasn't born yet. So it was just like a time when, even though we were supposedly a very progressive state, you had some of the most anti-immigrant, anti-black, anti-Latino legislation brewing, and so that was the macro. And in the micro, you know, I was growing up in Oakland where my friends were being slut-shamed and my friends were being were involved in gangs, and yet the narratives in our community were so they were just so not feeding us. They were also kind of fucking us up, you know? So I think that I began to understand that whoever controls the narrative and whoever creates narrative has a lot of power. And that's why I wanted to become an artist, was because I felt very invisible. I mean, somebody said like Selena, I think somebody threw out a Selena reference. And I was just talking earlier how the last major film that had a Latina protagonist is Selena. Wow. And we're 50 million deep in this country, and we are completely invisible to this day. So for me, art is about visibility and also complexity.
One of my favorite posters that you ever made says, I'm a slut and I vote.
Oh, yes, yes.
Thanks for that, too.
Yes. I love promoting the slut life.
That's right.
Actually, it was so funny because when I sent my initial ideas to Christian, I was gonna have like a big pussy right up there, right in the middle, and it was gonna be beautiful and glowing, and it was gonna just like sing to you when you came in. But then we had to change that idea. But
Christian, we gotta talk.
But the reason I really love this whole discussion because I have felt very connected to what everyone has said. But one thing that I want to bring up, and it has a lot to do with being a proud slut, is that I think that as people who face oppression, we sometimes define ourselves by our suffering only, and that we call activism activism is a really, like, it's a struggle. It's like we frame it as a struggle, as suffering. And I think that, and we even have to walk through the show to know that there's a lot of suffering, and that sometimes a lot of the art we make is about suffering, and it's about death, and it's about very harsh things that happen to us. And I also think that we need to be full human beings, and that means that we have to embrace joy, we have to embrace pleasure, we have to experience the full human range of emotions. That's actually why I made that piece, because it says, what does yes look like? Because there's a lot of no. I mean, we're against rent increases, we're against police brutality, we're against violence, we're against war, we're against drones, we're against guns. And we also have to articulate the world we want to see. And I think that that's especially hard when we are hypersexualized, when we are always shown as, you know, one way of being. And I think that as artists, we can tap into that full human emotion, the full range. And unfortunately in our culture, I mean, this is what racism does, is that only white people can be full human beings, and they can fall in love with computers and go out into outer space and get lost in the ocean and fight dragons and like figure out their life, and you know, and you never see people of color doing that. And so for me, art is about embracing all of that and embracing everything that I shouldn't, that supposedly I shouldn't be, like I shouldn't be slutty. I shouldn't be talking about pussies when I grew up in this Catholic family that told me to keep my legs closed. So I like being an artist precisely because of that, because it's about complexity.
Yeah, and your work and this piece is so embodied, you know, like I was reading the title, Pleasure is Freedom, and I was thinking about some of the people who I collaborate with, and they've told me over and over again, like, I may be in prison, but I'm free because I have X, Y, and Z, whether it's my pleasure, like resiliency, whatever the thing is. Yeah. And that, everything you just said, I'm like, that's exactly what I love and appreciate about your work. It's embodied, and it reminds us of joy and beauty amongst struggle and resistance and all these things, and the way that our bodies are also capable of pleasure, capable of connection.
Well, it's especially true, you know, Barbara Kruger, the artist, she said, our body is a battleground, and that's so real. I mean, you know, I came out about my abortion in 2012 after being in the closet for 10 years, and it was very critical for me because I understood that the ways in which we connect to our body or we don't, because in a lot of ways, if you grew up as a woman of color, many of my peers have shut down that part because they're hypersexualized and because violence has been a very, you know, it's impacted our communities. But I think that real liberation, we have to remember, I mean, we are the descendants of slaves. We are the descendants of people who have been exploited for their bodies. Like their body has been a natural resource. And women especially, like our body has been a natural resource. Even this whole national debate on abortion, it is about like whether or not someone else can tell you to reproduce or not. And so I think that body liberation is a very much core part of our movements. And I am really excited that trans activists have brought forth the question even of eliminating the gender binary, because it means that we begin to question all these things we were told about our bodies. That's actually why it's called Pleasure is Power, because for me, I mean, I wanted, this was my message. What does yes look like? But also, what does yes look like? Not just like more schools, more green trees, no climate change, etc. But what does yes look like when you're having a lot of orgasm in your life? When you're having, you know, great sex education, or you have health education, and you have the right food so you could experience pleasure. You don't have, you know, food deserts in your community. All of that we have to consider as well. So I really love embodiment. I think that's the next phase of my work. I'm even trying to figure out how to do more like body stuff, because I'm like, you know what I mean? I haven't used my body as much in my work, but I'm a big fan. I just found out about an artist like just a few years ago named Annie Sprinkle, and I was like, wow. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Like that blew my mind. So
yeah, she was showing her cervix on stage.
Yes, and I think that I feel, especially as a Latina, that all the ways in which in which all the messages I get of how not to be is precisely what I want to disrupt.
I appreciate you. Thank you.